Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world that you're joining us from today. Welcome to the World Federation of Youth Clubs April webcast featuring advocates for youth as we talk about sexuality education resources to support young people's health and well-being. Today's agenda is simple. We'll start with some basic housekeeping information and talk with you about how you can listen to today's session in Spanish. We'll have an introduction to our guest speaker and to their initiative, AMAZE. We'll hear more about the AMAZE initiative and advocates for youth. We'll review questions, and of course, we'll end with next steps and contact information. Before we get started today, a few reminders. This session is being recorded, and a link to this recording will be emailed to you after today's session. Live transcription in English will be available today, so you can follow along with English closed captions, or you can choose to listen along in Spanish. And our interpreter, Jennifer, is going to share how to access those instructions.
Muy buenos días. ¿Hay interpretación al español hoy día? Por favor, vaya a la parte inferior de su pantalla y haga clic en el botón Interpretación. Es como un globito. Ahí puede presionar audio y puede presionar español para escuchar en español. Gracias.
Thank you, Jennifer. Before we begin, a few other important pieces of information to know. This is a Zoom webinar. It's not a Zoom meeting, so you will not be able to see other participants, but you can see our speakers today. All participants are muted, but you can, and we hope you do, interact with us along the way today. There will be questions and opportunities to interact directly with the Q&A feature. So Tony, if you could please back us up one slide so we can show everyone how to access the Q&A. So if you're taking a look at your slide here, there's a few arrows that point at the chat, the opportunity to raise your hand, or to type information into the Q&A. You can ask questions at any time through this method, and our speaker today is going to ask you to enter information into the Q&A prompts so that we can really interact together, even though we can't see each other. So I hope that you will engage, listen, follow along, and take some new ideas back to your club about how to best educate youth in your community about sexuality education resources. And with that, I am happy to turn this session over to Nicole Cheatham. She is the Director of Youth Health and Rights Division at Advocates for Youth. She'll tell you all about Advocates for Youth and AMAZE, and you will learn much more about their work here in just a couple of minutes. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand this session over to Nicole.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And on behalf of Advocates for Youth, we'd like to thank the World Federation of Youth Clubs for this wonderful opportunity to come together. And thanks for everyone who's in attendance today. So with no further ado, I think we can move along, and happy to share here our objectives for today's webcast. We would like to discuss the importance and impact of sexuality education on the lives of young people. We will outline best practices in delivering sexuality and life skills education, identify challenges and opportunities of digital sexuality education and online information, discuss free video resources available through the AMAZE initiative that Abby just mentioned, and identify ways that the World Federation for Youth Clubs can make use of these resources. So what is AMAZE? AMAZE is an initiative of Advocates for Youth. So as Abby mentioned, Advocates for Youth, we're a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. We were established in 1980, and our mission is to advance the health and rights of young people domestically in the United States and globally. And one of our core initiatives is called AMAZE, or the AMAZE Initiative, which supports young adolescents with free, medically accurate, age-appropriate, affirming, and honest sexuality education videos and resources for parents and educators. Our materials are created by experts at Advocates for Youth and Sexuality Education, and we collaborate with a board of young people. We call them the AMAZE Youth Ambassadors, who also assist us in informing the content that we produce. And AMAZE really is seeking to answer these universal questions that young people have related to all sorts of topics around sexual and reproductive health, such as puberty. You know, wherever you are in the world, it's incredible that so many of the questions that adolescents have are in fact very similar. You know, when am I going to get my first period? How come my friends have it already? Or, you know, what's a normal? Why haven't I developed breasts yet? Or why am I so moody? So questions about puberty, questions about pregnancy and reproduction. How does it happen? How do you prevent it? About STIs and HIV. Healthy relationships or relationships in general, friendships with friends, with family, with partners, personal safety, how to stay safe, you know, how to recognize violence, how to understand what is consent, and then sexual orientation and gender identity. So these are the topics that AMAZE, the types of questions that AMAZE resources seek to respond to. So with that quick overview, we are now going to show you a video that explains the AMAZE initiative and resources through the type of video that in fact the information is delivered through. So this will give you a sense of the tone and the kind of spirit of the resources.
Can you get an STI but not have symptoms? Oh, I bet AMAZE has a video for this. Yep, here it is. Wow, AMAZE has everything. I wonder, who's behind all this great info?
Amaze.org. More info, less weird. It's no surprise young people have questions about STIs, relationships, and their bodies. When sex education means awkward lessons and embarrassing questions without honest, age-appropriate answers from trusted sources, young people are left in the dark, turning to misinformation online, pornography, and myths that other kids share. That's where AMAZE comes in. An engaging, trusted resource making sexuality education universally available to the YouTube generation. Our flagship YouTube channel alone has over 50 million views. With multiple video series and distribution platforms, AMAZE has evolved into a large international community of teens, educators, and parents. AMAZE leverages the expertise of sexuality educators, the creativity of animation professionals, input from our youth advisors, and the power of the internet to create and share free educational resources.
That's true. I've learned so much, from relationships to gender identity and sexual orientation to what to expect at the doctor's office.
AMAZE has over 200 videos, but our programming is more than just videos. AMAZE provides lesson plans for schools, content and tools for parents and allies, integration into healthcare systems, and even a coloring book and comic. Parents love AMAZE too, with many resources to help get through awkward conversations and become askable parents.
That explains why my parents stopped saying, "Jane, there are birds and there are bees." Now they give me real information that I actually care about.
AMAZE is an open platform where we welcome and support global partners as they adapt, integrate, and disseminate AMAZE resources to their audiences. Together, we can change the world and help young people build happy and healthy futures. Now, let's find out more.
Find out more right here on AMAZE.
Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. There's really no better person than Jane herself to tell us about what AMAZE is all about. She is featured in many of the AMAZE videos. So AMAZE has been around a little while. It was established in 2016, and the video, which was already maybe a year old, we were at 50 million views. Today we're at around 67 million views on the usamaze.org website. So it's been a growing initiative. It started out domestically in the United States and has just expanded all over the world due to the demand for resources that are age appropriate, scientifically accurate, and fun and positive. There are, as we've just heard, 200 videos to choose from the original inventory of AMAZE videos. But in addition to that, there are over 800 international versions of those 200 videos that have been adapted or dubbed into more than 40 plus languages. So given that, when we're talking about sexuality education, what exactly are we talking about? We've definitely outlined some of the topic areas that constitute sexuality education, but here's a handy definition that we like to share. Sexuality education provides young people with age-appropriate, scientifically accurate, non-judgmental, and culturally relevant information and opportunities to explore their attitudes, practice decision-making, communication, and skills needed to make informed decisions about their sexual and reproductive health. So why then is sexuality education needed? I'm sure I don't have to make a big argument for this among you all who are working with young people, but this information really does help young people prepare for their lives and their future to avoid unintended pregnancy or sexually transmitted infections. It provides basic information about human rights, and including information about services and to sort of foster health-seeking behavior. It can help combat violence and abuse, coercion, and discrimination by understanding better what that looks like and how to take action or seek support. And also it helps promote respect for everyone and for diversity. So in addition to that, comprehensive sexuality education, often known as CSE as well, offers also opportunities to correct misinformation. There is so much misinformation out there. Young people can get misinformation from their peers, certainly from the media and the internet. And sexuality education really does try to correct that and provide actually scientifically accurate information. There's opportunity to develop respectful and social and sexual relationships with the information and skills that the sexuality education provides. It allows for spaces for students or learners, to think about their choices, what their options are, and to make informed decisions that helps their well-being and the well-being of others. It can increase skills, again, to be able to make decisions and act on them. It also can improve perceptions among peer groups and social norms, increase communication with parents and trusted adults, and ensure the protection of rights throughout one's lifetime. It is a tall order, but there are many benefits. So curriculum-based comprehensive sexuality education programs have been researched quite a bit, and we have very strong evidence that points to these very concrete outcomes. For example, delayed initiation of sexual intercourse. A lot of times there's this idea that talking about sex or relationships or sexual and reproductive health might incite early onset of sexual activity. But in fact, it's very clear from the research that the opposite happens. When young people have information, they're able to delay their first, sexual intercourse. There's also decreased frequency of unprotected sexual activity due to the information about how to protect yourself. Decreased number of sexual partners, which really helps reduce the risk for sexually transmitted infections and HIV, reduced risk-taking, increased use of protection and against unintended pregnancy and STIs, and also we can see results that show empowerment of girls and women and greater gender equality. All right. Well, these are things that take some reflection, and so here are some, key issues that young people are concerned about typically. Certainly depends, but it's often quite, nonetheless many of these pop up all over the world. So we've mentioned some of them already. Puberty, definitely menstrual hygiene, questions about pregnancy, how to access services, questions about relationships and violence, about HIV and STIs. Mental health is an increasing concern among young people, and we're seeing this play out in it being a leading cause of death among adolescents in many parts of, globally, and among girls and boys increasingly. Substance misuse, and then influence of negative online information and images is also digital security issues definitely come up as well. So in terms of best practices for comprehensive sexuality education programming, there are a number of these. If we could just please, next slide. Thanks. According to the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, which is released by numerous UN agencies, and particularly led by UNESCO, best practices in sexuality education include programming that provides sexually accurate information that's incremental and builds over time, that's age and developmentally appropriate, that's curriculum-based, comprehensive, based on a human rights approach, also with a lens on gender equality, that's culturally relevant, transformative, and also able to develop and support the strengthening of skills. So really, sexuality education there are learning outcomes related to knowledge. Next slide, please. Related to attitudes, related to skills, and ultimately, these things can impact behavior. So further on this international technical guidance, there are several key concepts therein, and many of these overlap with the resources that the AMAZE initiative provides. We're just sharing these because in many countries, the international technical guidance serves as, a foundation off of which many governments and ministries of education, for example, will build off their curriculum related to sexuality education. They'll usually adapt, but a lot of the countries are using this guidance to inform their curriculum frameworks and actual curricula. So these are the key concepts, and with AMAZE, we are seeking to cover as much of this as we possibly can. So next reflection question, and I believe this one will be a yes or no. So if you do want to pop into the Q&A, please answer just yes or no. Do you think young people in your country receive adequate information on all of these topics that we just listed? Just do 20 seconds or so for a yes, no answer.
And if anyone in the audience is having any issues with the Q&A session, feel free to put your answer in the chat as well. If you don't want to make a public statement, you can message Abby or myself too.
We do have a few people answering in the Q&A to say no, not really, when it comes to young people receiving adequate information about all of these concepts.
Thank you, Abby. And indeed, that is not an unusual answer. Wherever you are in the world, it is challenging to provide young people with these with information that covers all of these concepts. And that's why any resources that can help contribute to that provision, we think is really important. And so in terms of sexuality education programming, just to continue on that, what factors help to improve impact? Well, speaking of, education systems, definitely integrating into formal education systems is one that can increase impact. The education sector has a big role to play here because of the reach and the scale through school systems that can help channel this information and make it accessible to young people. Also, involving parents and guardians is a key important practice to improve impact of sexuality education programming. So if you are going to initiate this kind of work, it's really important to look at the strategies for engaging parents. In addition, consulting with young people is really, really important. At Advocates for Youth, this is something that we integrate into all of our programming. It's with and for young people, and they have a role to play and a right to inform the programs that are impacting them. And finally, providing information in community settings. So again, if you're thinking about this, or perhaps you're already doing some of this, you probably already know the importance of community engagement. All right, so here's another one. Has your affiliate considered delivering sexuality education? How can you begin planning? So I think for this one, we can also just go with a yes, no, quick 30 seconds or so to ask if you've already been, if you've considered working on sexuality education or are already doing so.
We have one enthusiastic yes with an exclamation mark. And we have a no. So it seems like there's a mix of responses and considerations.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I think definitely, it's great to hear that there's a yes in there somewhere, because that I'm guessing would be very interesting to hear then how that's going for other affiliates to hear about in the future, perhaps. So if you are thinking about it or have been thinking about it, here's some good questions to ask along the way here. What is the current status of sexuality education in your community? Are young people receiving this in some way, shape, or form? And is it a quality? Is it responding to the other questions with with scientifically accurate information? What's the climate? It's really important to consider climate too. In other words, is the community open to this? Are there reservations or concerns? And that's really important to engage the community along the way. What do you hope to accomplish? What are your goals here? And what partners and resources will you need? No doubt there are others in the community that may also be interested in moving this along, and that could be potential partners. So those are just some suggested questions to reflect on as you're thinking that through. And then in addition, of course, considering the needs of young people, and I'm sure, the work you're doing, better than anybody else, the young people you're serving, who are the young people you're serving and what are their needs? Are there particularly marginalized groups of young people that you're wanting to reach or serve, such as young people living with HIV, young people living with disabilities, young people affected by humanitarian crisis, LGBTQ young people, or young people experience current or past trauma, or others? So given all of that, then there's the whole issue around the digital landscape. AMAZE, as you've heard and seen, is a digital resource that's available online. So what is that digital landscape for sexuality education? Well, generally speaking, the internet, of course, we all know the internet has taken off, the access is increasing, and we know that children and adolescents under 18 account for an estimated 1 in 3 internet users around the world. And this seems to be on the rise. In 2021, over 4.26 billion people were using social media worldwide, a number, expected to increase to almost 6 billion in 2027, just a crazy number. And young people ages 15 to 24 are the most connected age group worldwide. 71% are online, compared with 54% of the total population. So young people are definitely online, which I'm sure many of us are well aware of, but it continues to grow. Furthermore, though, it's not all equal. There are definite gaps in access to the internet and online, the capability to access material online. There's a global gender gap that's increasing owing to the rapid growth in the number of male internet users in developing countries. It has, and this fluctuates a lot because it's also narrowed in some places, but widened, for example, in Arab states, Asia and the Pacific and Africa. And African youth are the least connected in the world. Around 60% are not online, compared with just 4% in Europe. So I think it's important to recognize that, the digital spaces are not everybody, there's an access issue. Nonetheless, with the growing number of adolescents and young people who are getting online, I think, this is why we feel that the digital resources can be so helpful at this time. Okay, so with that, let's do another reflection question. And this is a yes, no. Do young people in your community have regular access to digital spaces? Yes or no?
I have one yes so far and one no.
Okay. I like this yes, no, yin yang, yes, no, or it's the balance of the world. So sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And when there is, it's, great to be able to leverage these digital resources through online access. And when there's not, AMAZE has also used other ways, our partners, to use the videos, like the good old thumb drives, and downloading the MP4 files and putting them on thumb drives and disseminating them that way, for example, has been one way to get around these issues of access. Another one is helping cover the costs, for example, of young people to access data, for example, if they're engaged with us in a program in some way. All right, well, thank you for that. So now granted, the digital spaces, can be tricky. It's not, there's the good part, and then there's the not so good part, and there's definite safety issues. So AMAZE has also is also addressing this through the videos themselves. So with that, I will pass. I think we're going to have an opportunity to watch Being Safe on the Internet.
Love and kisses from... Oh, it's on! I'm sorry, guys. I know I've told you I'd share everything with you, but this letter is really, really private. Okay. Da-da. Now it's safe in my top secretive box. The internet is a great place to do research for school. Share pictures with friends, play video games, or check out the latest trending videos. But it's important to remember that there are billions of people who access the internet, and not everyone has good intentions when doing so. You should think carefully before you share personal information, pictures, or videos on the internet, even if you think it is private. Nothing on the internet is completely private. It's a good rule of thumb not to put up anything that could embarrass you later. If you wouldn't want your grandmother to see it, then don't post it. And don't share private information with people you don't know. Trust your instincts. If someone approaches you online and makes you feel uncomfortable or in danger, stop communication with them immediately. And tell a parent or another trusted adult. It's best not to meet in person someone you've only met online, even if you've been communicating with them for a long time. They may not be who they have told you they are, and it could be dangerous. If you do decide to meet someone from online, it's best to meet them in a public place and to not go alone. Always take a friend along just to be safe, and let someone else know exactly where you are going and who you are going to meet. Bullying someone online through email, social media, text messaging, or any other website or app is called cyberbullying and is still a form of bullying. It's often better to block, delete, or try to ignore bullying messages than to respond to them. If that doesn't work, getting help from a parent, school counselor, or another trusted adult might be a good idea. That's especially true if the cyberbullying contains threats. Remember to always keep your personal information private. Check your privacy settings to make sure that only your friends can see what you post. And never, ever share your passwords with anyone else. The internet could be a wonderful place to explore. Just remember to stay safe while doing it. Oh, what was it? My dog's birthday. Shoot, okay, that didn't work. Oh, I know. Last 4 digits of my cell number. Okay, that wasn't it. That might take a while. Until next time, don't forget to visit me at amaze.org or go to my YouTube channel to watch more. Bye!
Great. Thank you, Jane. Great. Thank you. So really, the digital spaces do offer a lot of opportunity, wide scale, potential cost-effective approach, can compensate for gaps in school-based education whereby young people can access this information directly. There's a number of other benefits to these spaces. So we are, just trying to leverage that in the work that we're doing here with AMAZE. I think we're going to pass on the next video only because I'm cognizant of time. And we could show one. Okay, yeah, no, let's keep going. Yeah, how about we jump down to slide 32, please. Just to say that, to reiterate, that AMAZE resources then, in addition to, thank you. Okay, for educators, we have resources for educators and parents. And the resources for educators include toolkits, lesson plans, discussion guides, and other materials. There's also a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum for K through 12 grade. That is inclusive and also available, open, and usable. It can be adapted or translated, that many educators are using, and that lesson plans there also integrate AMAZE videos in a variety of cases. And the AMAZE videos are mapped to the international technical guidance that we mentioned earlier, for ease of identification of where within that guidance the videos can be used. And then there's also websites, books, newsletters, discussion questions, and links that we provide for educators. In addition, so for example, here's a tool that is a video discussion guide that was developed by young people in Southeast Asia that we've been working with UNESCO and UNFPA at Advocates for Youth. And this is one of many guides. This one's a regional one that accompanies regionally adapted AMAZE videos. So in terms of options with partnering with AMAZE, there are several. Quickly here, one can be to integrate the existing videos into programming. A second is to subtitle videos into a language. A third is to dub videos voiced over in another language, or the same language but with a local accent. Fourth is adaptation of videos to the local context or adding of sign language. And the fifth is to create new videos. So quickly, just to give some example of these, for example, in South Africa, there is a platform called BeWise that is managed by the Ministry of Health, and they've integrated the AMAZE videos into their platform. So they already had this going on, they already had information, they were already referring young people to services, and they found that the videos that had been adapted by AMAZE for South Africa were very useful, so they've just integrated them into the platform. So that's where you can use, AMAZE videos that already work for you. Secondly, there's the subtitling option where partners choose to subtitle either closed or open captions in their language. And that's usually one of the easiest things to do, second to integrating something that already exists. Third is dubbing. It requires a little more resources to hire actors, actresses that can voice over AMAZE videos. And in this case, in Lebanon, for example, they went as far as to use famous actors and actresses that people recognize their voices in Lebanon when they hear the AMAZE videos. So that's been very successful to make them even more, popular. Fourth is adapting a video. So adaptation of the video is where you're actually, as here, you can see the original US video on the left. Here's an adaptation for Vietnam. Here's an adaptation from Fiji. So there's minor changes usually in skin color, in hair, in clothing, in backdrops, in addition to minor tweaks sometimes in the script. For example, if an expression doesn't make sense in the other language, then it can be tweaked to be replaced with an expression that's locally understandable. And then finally, we have the option of creating new videos together. Some partner organizations, there are definite gaps, that there are, sure, we've done 200 videos, but there's many topics out there that need attention within the broad scheme of sexual reproductive health and rights. And in this case, our partner Smile Outreach in Nigeria wanted to specifically address intergenerational transactional relationships. And therefore, we worked with them where they led on the development of this video, that it was a brand new AMAZE video. So I believe then in terms of the affiliates of the WFYC, here we've just overlaid what AMAZE resources we have in the countries where you're working. And we're happy to follow up with that after the fact if there's interest in us sharing specifically the videos so that you have a sense of what they are in case you would like to possibly work with them. I think next we can jump down to sort of examples of dissemination and how our partners disseminate videos. So really, it's very decentralized and up to the partner organization or the affiliate in this case to decide how you'd want to disseminate the videos. Some groups disseminate them through social media, and that can be TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, some of the or other social media platforms. Some also use other options, like in Nigeria, that video I just mentioned, they also created a comic book that accompanies the video so that they have a piece that's non-digital. Well, it can be digital, but it can also be handed out and printed that they like to use as well. So if there's interest in collaboration, how can AMAZE support you? Well, through various ways. So we're happy to provide lists, as I just mentioned, of the dubbed or adapted videos for your region or country or language. We can support use of the videos, embedding them through playlists on your website, showcasing your organization on our website or your affiliate, if we're partnering together, promoting work on our social media as well, if there's work that you're doing with the videos. And certainly inclusion of logo and credits, but also very importantly, the AMAZE team, if there's interest in working with these videos, we are able to provide you without any, of course, cost, because this is all in the public domain, with the files, like the scripts of the videos, if you need to review those, or the video files if you're seeking to dub over them or to adapt them. And we're able to provide the assets, so to speak, or the files to facilitate that, that kind of adaptation or local adaptation of the videos. So with that, let's close out with the last reflection. Is there one thing you can take from this discussion today and implement in your affiliate? Feel free to take a moment if you'd like to chat, note anything in the Q&A.
We have one person in the Q&A who said that they are going to take this information about the AMAZE resources and share it with their coworkers.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Abby. And thank you for that contribution. That's wonderful. And so we're definitely available. I think our QR code is coming up here for further information, and happy to connect. I think there'll be a follow-up email too with a contact, Darcy Weaver, my wonderful colleague, that will be happy to work with you to advance any collaborations together. But we really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. Hope this has been interesting. And I think now it's, yes, opportunities for questions and answers, correct, Abby?
Yes, absolutely. So we have about 15 minutes remaining in our webcast time today. So please go ahead and enter questions in the Q&A, or if you prefer to ask your question anonymously, you can send your question in the chat directly to me. I will not read your name, but I will ask the question on your behalf. We actually do have some questions that have already come in. And the first one I'd like to ask you, Nicole, is if a club is not already talking about sexuality education, where where do they begin?
Thank you. What a great question. I think that one first step would definitely be to kind of do an look around and see if anybody locally is already doing some level of sexuality education programming. And there might be an opportunity to collaborate and, because that could ease the path a bit, where somebody, if there are groups already, they could be coming in and working with you to start that up and share share strategies. And certainly we'd be also very happy to share initial strategies for very first steps. But as mentioned, the community outreach and parental engagement is also really important. If you are going to be initiating sexuality education activities, it's important that from the very beginning I would say to involve community, so that it's not a surprise down the line. And so I would say seeing what's out there already, and then also being cognizant of the engagement of the community at the beginning.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We do have a few more questions that have come through in the question and answer. Two of them are really quick, so I'm going to address those first. The first question is, can we receive these resources as slides, or is all of this information on your website? I'll answer real quickly before Nicole shares more information, but we are happy to share these slides with you today. So because you're here in the session, you're going to get a follow-up email that includes both the slides and the link to the recording. And then Nicole, if they want to find more information, where do they go? Right, so amaze.org would be the go-to central place. And if you're interested in a particular country or language, there's a world map up there that you can click on to try to navigate into particular languages or videos in countries as well. Thank you. And this isn't a question, it's a thank you for the information. And I hope that we can work together with the clubs in Mexico. So it sounds like you have some folks who are interested in learning some more. And we have a tough question in the chat. How do you suggest introducing sexual education to a community who is against or reserved about hearing about sexuality education? Maybe it's taboo to talk about in your community. How do you start those conversations? Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really amazing that in many communities where it is difficult, sensitive, how one can actually advance this, because so I would say fundamentally people care about young people. They care about the young people in their community, whether it's parents or educators, families care. So looking for an entry point is important, an entry point that allows you to start these conversations that isn't controversial. And for example, during the HIV/AIDS, the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, talking about HIV was a critical entry point for sexuality education because people were concerned, they were worried, people were dying, young people were getting infected. They still are in many parts of the world, but at that time, this was an entry point. More recently, gender-based violence has become actually an entry point in many communities for having discussions and introducing the idea of sexuality education. Also, teen pregnancy prevention in some countries where you're having skyrocketing rates has been something that people can come together around and want to talk about. But so I think it's really important to have a good sense of the context and search for where those openings are. And that too can happen with engagement of community members themselves. What is it that's worrying you about young people? And then talking to young people directly, what are you worried about? And then beginning there. The beauty of comprehensive sexuality education, it's very broad. There's so many topics,
So you don't necessarily have to, begin with controversial topics. You can enter and begin with the less controversial topics and then start broadening it out to where it becomes more and more, covering more and more pieces.
So it sounds like a successful strategy might be to talk with youth and the community about what those issues are that are impacting young people and start from there in a way that's approachable and understandable. Makes a lot of sense. We have a couple more questions. One question is asking if you could just clarify, again, in maybe a little bit more detail about how AMAZE it has worked with maybe youth clubs. I think you mentioned a little bit about how you've partnered or around the world, but could you just share a couple more examples?
Yeah, of course. So yes, we've partnered with some youth associations, for example, or youth-led organizations, and as well as NGOs, community-based organizations, UN agencies, governments. And how we partner is typically we're happy to, if there's interest by a group to partner with us, and they don't have to be a registered entity, we are happy to have a conversation about what that collaboration might look like, establish a memorandum of understanding. So something where both groups agree to what it is the collaboration looks like and what the terms are for the sharing of resources and information, which we outline very, transparently as it relates to AMAZE. And then really then the group we follow their timeline. So the group, if they're ready to roll and do a bunch of stuff together, we'll support with access to the information, the resources, et cetera, or supporting their dissemination of the materials. Or if they need more time, that's fine. We're not in any rush. Sometimes groups have to fundraise on their own, though, if they want to do something like dubbing or adapting videos, which requires money to pay a video production group or a professional to make those changes to videos, then they'll take time to fundraise. And then we're also happy to provide language to stick in a proposal to try to fundraise for that as for that work. So yeah, those are some. So there are many groups, yes, that we're working with in that way, more or less. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And you mentioned that some groups have had to fundraise. Could you just clarify what costs are associated with using AMAZE resources?
Right. So the AMAZE resources are free, available at no cost. And thank you for the question. They can be used without paying anything. And if you want the MP4 files, we're happy to provide those for free. They're available on YouTube online for free, as are all of the complementary resources for parents and educators. That said, if there's interest in locally adapting or dubbing or subtitling videos, that does require resources. And the cost for this varies tremendously around the world, as you can imagine. A brand new video, a brand new 3.5-minute video can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to produce. But again, that really depends where you are. That's kind of the US kind of costs, but it depends. Dubbing can be, as little as $1,000 or less US dollars to dub a video, or even but it really depends where you are, and then adapting can be, somewhere in the middle, like $5,000 US dollars. But again, we've had partners in different parts of the world where this is much less than that. But I don't want to understate that it is generally expensive to do video production work. But the videos that are currently available by AMAZE in the different languages, et cetera, they're all free, available for free.
Thank you for that clarification. So I hope everyone understands and recognizes that there are just a tremendous amount of free virtual resources available through Advocates for Youth and their AMAZE initiative, and that you can choose to make some changes to videos to adapt to what you need, and that is at your own cost. But the majority of these resources that we're talking about, and certainly everything that you need to get started, is free and accessible to anyone in the world. Do we have any other questions? We have time for perhaps one more, so we'll give it just a few seconds to see if any additional questions come in. Okay, I don't see any other questions, but if you do have additional questions for Nicole, we will be happy to share her contact information so you can get in touch and learn more about AMAZE and about how you can bring some of these resources directly to your club. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned a lot, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your resources and knowledge with us. For those of you who are attending this webcast, a couple of reminders about next steps. As always, we do have a webcast coming up next month in May. I do want to share that the format for that will be a little bit different than you're used to. You'll actually get to hear an interview between our CEO, Kirk Dominic, and our Leadership Institute facilitator, Ed Mischrell, for our May webcast. More information about that coming soon. But perhaps the most important next step for all of our WFYC friends, affiliate members, and the global community is to please register today for Lead, Innovate, Collaborate, which is our 2023 virtual conference to be held this June 21st through 23rd. Advocates for Youth and AMAZE will be there, and actually we'll have a session and a booth, and you'll have lots of opportunities to interact with their staff and learn even more at the conference. As always, please continue to share this information and these resources along with our newsletters with your staff and volunteers. We want to share this information widely, and of course contact our office or your mission advancement advisor if you have any questions about World Federation of Youth Clubs. And with that, I just want to say a final thank you to Nicole for joining us today and for sharing all that you did about the sexuality and health education resources available through AMAZE and Advocates for Youth. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.